So Sandeep, thank you so much for joining us in this next edition of Fire Up series. We're talking to startup founders. Every founder, every startup has something interesting and unique that they've done, which would be of interest to other startups as well. So we're just trying to find those facets from each startup and then discussing that. You have dealt with the whole regulatory landscape. You're bang square in the middle of it, and also with a lot of ambiguities. So that's what we're going to discuss with you. How do you kind of grow a business that is square in the middle of all kinds of regulations? So before we get started, Sandeep, why don't you just quickly in a few minutes share the journey? I mean, how did you start? How did the idea of Adonmo come about? What were the early thinking, and then how did it pivot, and what's the current status? If you can just quickly share your journey.
Thanks, Ramesh, for inviting me today. So always happy to share experiences, and I guess I strongly believe that's how, as an ecosystem, we grow. To really talk about our journey with Adonmo, so I should actually go back to my fourth year of college. So the first time I ever started a company was in fourth year. So we had this notebook company. Where it was basically very cool looking notebooks, and we would put success stories of companies in there as advertisements for the for that company, and then it also acts as an inspiration for the kids buying the notebook. And our revenue model was to kind of subsidize very high quality notebooks at the market. So we had a fairly good product, and then our initial customers also really loved it. But we really failed to scale the business. I personally have learned a lot on why we could not do that, and one of the reasons is obviously marketing at scale. So when I was in Microsoft in about 2 years after college, when we were looking to start a company, my co-founder and I, so that acted as an inspiration. My experience from the previous startup and struggling with marketing, especially outdoor marketing, acted as an inspiration. So we wanted to do something in that space for sure. But the idea of course, now we are no longer just a taxi top digital company, but the idea of putting screens on cabs actually came to me in Goa, where we have these nano cars going around with ads on top saying "Party at Anjuna Beach tonight." So it really kind of hit me that that's an opportunity to advertise on top of cars, and more so if we can make it relevant to the particular location that the car is flying in and the overall context of the situation. We felt that would be a pretty good value add to the current out-of-home industry, the way things are being done. And obviously, most industries kind of take their digital transition path, but unfortunately, out-of-home advertising industry has been one of the laggers. So we thought it's a good time to do something in that space, and that's when we quit Microsoft in about July 2017, and then we actively started working on the idea and company. So initially we were incubated out of T-Hub. We still are a T-Hub startup proudly so, but we initial 1 year was super tough for us. So we obviously the first big hurdle was regulations, and then the thing is we had to get regulatory approvals from multiple departments in the government. And back then we didn't even know that we had to get regulatory approvals, let alone from what departments we need them. Good thing is I was once told that only foolish people are foolish enough to start companies which look very difficult on the outside. So we were young, we were foolish enough to think this would work, and then we started. Maybe today, if I were to start the same company, I would not dare to start a company in this space with so much regulations. But yeah, lucky enough, we didn't know much. We started, and then we managed to get our initial set of permissions partially from few departments. And then we kind of raised our first investment, launched our first set of product, went to market with it, failed miserably, then realized that we needed to redo the product in terms of design. then we redid the product, we launched it, raised our second round of investment. This time we got some really good investors, I mean, non-friends and family, and then some celebrity investors in that round. And then we landed our first big client, IKEA, when they launched in Hyderabad. And I think ever since landing clients was relatively easier for us. I mean, today we are there in 3 cities for taxi stops, but overall 5 cities in India for other formats. But we've kind of realized the direction in which the company should head is not really just the taxi top segment of the business, but to take a more platform approach to things and then try and aggregate as many screens as possible onto it. The whole idea being, we believe screens would have to be like a communication medium to the public, not just for advertising. So we want to tie them all beautifully and then create context and useful infrastructure that the governments and various bodies can utilize for public communication. So most recently, we have raised our funding from Alibaba. So before that, we've raised from Astar and Mumbai Angels. Most recently, it was from Base Capital, one of and Financial's early stage investment fund. And with them, they bring in a lot of their Chinese expertise on scaling up digital out of home business, especially the kind of scale they deal with there is unprecedented. So we expect India to kind of hit such scale in the next 7 to 10 years. And we hope to be that company to dominate the space.
No, absolutely. I'm sure you'll get there. So you just briefly touched upon the brush with regulation. So what was the first time? I mean, from what you described, it seemed like you were surprised when you first got to know. So what was the first brush like? I mean, where and how did it happen? When you discovered that like this is the regulated space?
First one was obviously our realization that why isn't anyone doing this already? Because it sounds so intuitive to have advertising on top of cars as well. So that was our first reaction to it, and then we realized maybe not enough people, drivers are willing to put it up, and but regulations didn't still hit us, or rather hit our minds by then. So. But once we figured out that the issue is not with the drivers, not with people trying it out, but it's actually with regulation. So through one of our contacts, we reached out to GHMC to check if something like this is permitted. And obviously, the simplest reply from them was that it's not permitted. And then I almost wanted to kind of just give up and move on. Because I'm not like a super enthusiastic person when it comes to government dealings. I mean, lucky enough that we two co-founders who lift each other up whenever things get bad. So we got back at it, and then this time somehow miraculously we had some crucial connect in the police department, whom we approached, traffic especially. Traffic department whom we approached, and then explained the overall concept, the benefit that it would give the city, the driver community, and all of that. So that officer was progressive enough to kind of look at it, and then he's given us permission to run a trial with 5 cars, and then that's how it all started. And then subsequently, literally a number of hurdles, hundreds of visits to government offices. And I would rather say thousands of hours of time put into dealing with these people and all.
I mean, imagine if you didn't have a kind of an appreciative, helpful police officer. Would have been even worse.
Yeah. I think we would not have started the company if not for that one officer.
So, if you were to lay out a map of steps dealing with regulation, right? Obviously, while it's extremely promising, and like you said, since nobody has ventured into it, virtually greenfield, right? So it's very, very promising, but you have to figure out the regulation before you can even kind of get into it seriously. So now, if you were to look back,
what are few key steps if you have to kind of recount the steps? Okay, obviously finding a helpful police officer is an important step. Somebody in the government who appreciates what you're doing and who's willing to kind of help map the system. But what are the other steps involved until you got the okay to operate?
So I think almost always it should start with identifying the value. Obviously, there's business value in whatever you would be doing. There'd be an employment that would be generated. But other than that, what is the value add to the community as a whole, and positioning it in a way that the government would understand that this is something just beyond business interests, and this can really be something which would benefit thousands of people, and then really act as uh, a new addition to the overall society, right? So I think first to anything is just identifying that piece, and every company would should really introspect to identify this piece of it. So once that is done, I think it comes down to kind of finding that evangelist officer, almost always that one person who is willing to take that risk, take that one step in the right direction of unknown. I mean, it's sad, but yeah, you definitely would need someone backing you in the office. Luckily, Telangana government that way is relatively more proactive in their approach, and then they're not very risk averse. So they do experiment. So Hyderabad that way is a good place to start companies like that, which are usually under regulatory pressure otherwise. And then once you find that officer, you should never go for the uh, full entire kill all at once. So you should almost put it in as slow poison, where you'll slowly ask them for a small trial with very few numbers and a very harmless approach, where they would not feel, oh my God, this is a very big change and I would need to run it by a lot of people, and I don't know if I'm putting my reputation at stake. So it's very important that you make that officer feel very comfortable that there is no downside to whatever you're trying to do, and if anything, they would only be regarded as pioneers for doing that. Make the package look very harmless, at least the initial starting part of it. Try and break it down to as MVP as possible. So once you do that, it's all about getting in on the ground, networking with people, making sure that there's positive word about everything, and then making sure the officer who approved the trial or demo hears the positive feedback or gets the positive feedback from the ground, and then some kind of appreciation would be great. So maybe find a politician who would kind of endorse what you're doing, and then try and showcase it as part of their innovation coming out of their constituency or state, and then post that it's just persistence, if you'll ask me. So it's just about showing up day after day, and then you'll face a lot of rejection for sure. But the important part is just showing up. So one thing I've observed is a lot of these officers, it's mostly about persistence, right? So once they see you 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, there would come a point when they would kind of feel sorry for you, and then also recognize the genuine effort that you're putting into it. And they would, I mean, if not completely get things done for you, but they would at least point you in a way or direction where you can get or you can achieve progress, right? And a lot of times officers would also suggest you I mean, out of getting to know you and out of love that they have for you that they've developed over time, they might suggest, why don't you do something more easier or better without all these issues?
Very helpful.
Very smart guy. You can put your minds to better use in advertising. So all of this, we had a lot of this thing also, but eventually, I think it's all about persistence, and then the right kind of networking, making those quality good conversations with these officers beyond work and this. But something I've observed is, at least in my personal experience, that most of the officers connect to kind of one point. So it might be that kid who's preparing for IIT JEE, or it might be that common friend of yours who went to their batch for of IAS or IPS training, or it might just be common interest in cricket, right? So it's also important that you kind of identify that what is that catch that you can really build a relationship around.
So in many ways, it is almost like normal sales, right? You have to understand the person. You have to kind of, the purpose is different here. You're not selling. You're trying to deal with some regulatory requirements, but the process seems no different. If anything, you will be dealing with a little bit more higher egos here. But the process seems no different from normal sales, right?
Yeah, it is like normal sales, and then you would have to butter their egos and really.
That is the one fundamental difference. These are probably little harder egos.
Yeah. You
So,
rarely
so
achieve
to
good work.
so to kind of just to recap, first of all, understand the regulation. When that's the starting point, you understand what is the regulatory requirement, whose purview does it come under, who should approve, why, and what, and all that. Second is, like you said, make sure there's a clear value statement. You have to prepare your value statement. How does it help? Whoever it's going to help, be sure about the value. Third is to find somebody who can be your champion within the government system. Could be a senior officer, police officer, somebody in your real life. Find somebody, and as a startup, as a tech startup, it's probably relatively a little easier because there's an intellectual angle that you can connect. But still, you have to find that one person with whom the whole idea connects and is willing to help. And then the fourth thing is, like you said, most important, just find the right people and just persevere. You have to be there day in, day out until you get the required permissions. The fifth thing, I think, very important thing, or that was the fourth thing. The important thing was like to break it down so that don't go asking approval for your big thing. Just go bitwise. Say, I just want one vehicle pilot. Maybe I just want to expand to 5 vehicles. So just incrementally do it and never ask for the big thing at once. I think it's a very important, it's a very, very pragmatic approach. Like you said, the person approving is not going to worry about, like, am I making a mistake? It's so small, the person should think like it's okay to approve. I think this is very important. I think that's a fantastic series of steps. So in hindsight, while you did say, like, I mean, if you knew it was such a regulatory nightmare, you probably would not have ventured into this. But now that you've kind of managed to crack it, would you still say the same thing? I mean, if you had to go back, and would you do it any differently now? Assuming you do
I mean, with if I were a 27-year-old back then, with whatever wisdom I've gained, I mean, not about the space, but about space in general, startups and all, I would probably pick something which would not involve a lot of regulations. But that being said, I personally believe that the very large change makers and the very large companies are very successful startups. A lot of them actually emerge from regulatory gray areas, let it be Airbnb or Ola or Rapido. So Farm Easy. So regulatory gray area gives you an opportunity. I mean, of course, gives you a lot of hurdles and struggles, but it also gives you an opportunity to really tap into something which no one else have tapped into.
True. I think that is closest. That is the closest to a greenfield opportunity you can come with. Right? Most greenfield opportunities are driven by research and very, very deep IP. This is the closest to greenfield you can expect. I mean, because of regulation, nobody has ventured in. So it's virtually available for the taking if you can figure out how to do it.
Absolutely. So sure. I mean, I would definitely go through the journey. What I was trying to say is, probably now I'm not. Back then, I was foolish enough to go in this direction without knowing all the risks, which is good. Which is a very good. I believe that capability kind of goes down as you grow older.
I think at that time you had the age-induced foolishness. Right now you have the wisdom that you have. So I think you probably would do it again if you have to.
Yeah, why not?
So Sandeep, thank you so much for joining us. But before we sign off, we've been asking every founder to give us one growth hack tip that you would share based on your experiences that you would share with other founders? Any facet of the startup, a growth hack tip that you would share?
So growth hack in terms of company building, I would definitely say hiring. Spend as much as 40% of your time on hiring, especially, I mean, once you're off that initial MVP pilot or initial stage of the company. I just realized it about 4 to 5 months back, and the change has been magical for me, at least. That's been the biggest realization, or rather the single largest takeaway that I would have from my last 4 years or 3 years of startup experience. So hiring is very, very crucial, and also do not shy away from engaging with recruiters and all aggressively, but make sure that you personally do interview and bring in at least the first 50 members or 60 members of the company should definitely be interviewed and very thoroughly checked by the founder. So this probably would be my advice.
I think it's a fantastic point, especially the fact that founders should interview. I mean, you're building the DNA of the organization. I think the core team should reflect the founder very, very closely. I think should resonate with the founder's views and thinking. I think it's a fantastic point. Founders should personally get the initial team in. So Sandeep, thank you so much, and enjoy your break. I think much needed break. Like you said, it's come at the right time. If it has to come, I think it has come at the right time. And then I'm sure the lockdown will lift, and like you will scale to other cities. So all the best in your journey, Sandeep.
Thank you, Ramesh. Looking forward to seeing you in person.
Thank you. Bye.